Happy Friday, everyone. So we've got not nearly as exciting as what's going on outside. Has anybody gone and met the firms yet? Yeah, talk with them. So a lot of interesting stories. A lot of the people at Meet the Firms are alumni, so they can tell you stories about the faculty members that they worked with here. Depends on how far the alumni go back. I think most of them could tell you about recent ones, but we've had some people who are graduates that remember the faculty before I started here, and they say they're all gone now, which is kind of true. We had like a massive turnover of faculty members in the mid 2010s. So, but good opportunity nonetheless to develop your networks and hopefully find a job, getting out there. Just as a reminder, if you have not gotten to Meet the Firms, it's going to be going on till 2 today. If you are not planning on attending Meet the Firms, then about 3 weeks from now, it's on a Thursday, the 25th, I think. Thursday, the 25th is the Career Expo. Those are the 2 extra credit opportunities for the course. So please keep those in mind. You don't want to miss out on extra credit because let's be honest, it's just free. It's free currency for this course. It's free currency. That and the fact that I encourage you to take advantage of network opportunities when you can. So today we're going to do Excel 2. Again, we're going to be doing some pretty remedial stuff. It's not going to be anything too ground shaking. There are some things that you want to take detailed notes on because I will expect you to know these for the exam. So as we're going through these, again, I recommend that you hold on to the worksheet and save them and then make notes as we're going through because I will have at least a few notes that I say this is really important. Make sure you remember this. So first tab we're going to look at is going to be one that is kind of consistent with the way that I operate. So whenever I'm recording scores, usually I record to the second decimal place. And you can kind of see here, I've got some scores here that are some really weird numbers. That was because I divided numbers by 17. When you divide by a prime number, you get all kinds of fun results. But it just came with these numbers. And if I wanted to make these more palatable, I could actually just use the formatting style. Now, you can actually adjust the numbers up here with these. You will never do it correctly every single time. I know that this is decreased decimal, but I will tell you I've hit increased decimal many times. So I could actually decrease the decimal just like that right here. But if we want to get more specific details, we want to be able to round the information to the 2 decimal places, not have the embedded information of the other values that are there. That's when we were using the round function. Now, the round function is not particularly difficult. I'm sure that you've used it before, but let's just go ahead and do some refreshers and talk about how we would utilize this in context with actual information. So let's say I want to round to 2 decimal places. Instead of saying that I've got these unruly numbers here, I want to round to 2 decimal places. I'm just going to go equals around and highlight the number I want to round and then say 2 decimal places. That's all there is to it. Nothing particularly exciting, thrilling there. My assumption is that even if you've not used this function before, that it's probably a pretty easy function that you can figure out without too much difficulty. More frequently, you're going to be doing rounding to whole numbers. So if we were saying round to 2 decimal places is round input and then number of digits 2, rounding to no decimal places would be obviously 0, okay? Now, just for giggles, this will not be on the exam. I won't test you on it. Maybe it'll be on the exam. Who knows? But we will never use this. But I just wanted to do it for fun because let's say I wanted to round to the nearest 100, not 100th, 100. So I round either to 100 or to 0. Okay. I'm going to give you a second to try to figure out the formula. It's going to seem completely non-intuitive, and yet it's going to be the correct answer. So see if you can figure out what that formula would be to round to the nearest 100. So it's either going to be 100 or 0 will be the result. All right. Does anybody feel confident they figured it out? Okay. What is the number of digits? I saw a lot of people confident they figured it out, and then nobody's saying anything. So -2, yeah, -2. Isn't that completely and totally counterintuitive? You just kind of like say that can't possibly work. That can't possibly work, and yet it does somehow. It does somehow. There's a lot of really kooky things with Excel. I think I've already mentioned it in this one, but I actually talked about it in my advanced class this morning. Excel will not recognize dates before 1900. So that's also something I did, which I thought may be interesting if you're a historian and you're tracking like specific dates in history and you want to create a spreadsheet and you say this event occurred on June 3rd, 1864 or something like that, Excel won't recognize it. Apparently, Excel believes all of human history started in 1900 and has been occurred after there. That's when the start of human history is going. So interesting things that you'll find in Excel, but we're not done. We're not done. A couple of other features. These are kind of basic. If you wanted to round up or round down, like say you wanted to round to the next nearest single digit, there are functions that can actually specify. So instead of saying round based on value, you want to always round up. We're going to use the function round up, which is spelled just like the Roundup product that kills weeds. Yeah. I'm just going to round up to 0 decimal places. And you will notice when we round up, it looks very similar to the round to 0. The big difference is going to be for the values that rounded down automatically. So 81.8 gets rounded up to 82. 86.49 gets rounded up to 87. And you could probably guess if we have a round up function, we also have a round down function. So equals round down. Same 0 decimal places. And it should be exactly 1 digit different than a round up function because it always rounds down, assuming that we don't have values that are exactly equal to that, which I already told you they would not be exactly equal to 0 because I round divided by 17. So the only thing I could have is 100. But I did this deliberately, so not. All right, that was really, really basic. I want to do something a little bit more challenging. So we're up for challenges. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go to the next tab. So class codes. So we've seen these individuals before, and I created a class code for everybody. Now, this class code is not anything particularly difficult. The class code is just the initials of the individuals, and then a track number that I've added down here where you can see the table for the track number. And then finally, their banner IDs, which their banner IDs we established in the last exercise. So we're going to do a few things to disseminate this information. And these are tasks that I have to do fairly regularly. Some of the dissemination is pretty straightforward. Some of it we're going to talk about requires some trickiness, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to combine their names. This actually always happens whenever I have a table that comes to me from Banner, is that it will say the last name and then the first name, but I will never get a full name. So when I transport this to Excel, one of the very first things I do is I create a full name. Now, there are multiple ways to go about this. I'm going to tell you right now that there is a much easier shortcut that we're going to learn about later in the semester, and you may already use it. If that's the case, that's fine. I'm going to teach you the original method, and then the reason why is because we need to get used to Excel notation of using the function first. Especially when we start talking in the next few weeks, we start using functions where the use of the function itself at the beginning doesn't make much sense because it doesn't follow kind of grammatic vernacular. We need to get accustomed to that. So if you use the formula, you can use one of two formulas. The old school formula, the one that originally started out with Excel, was concatenate. CONCATENATE. And it's actually a formula in here. You can actually type in CON, and you can see concatenate is a formula in here. Now, they've actually replaced this formula in best practices with the one that lists at the top here, this concat. Now, is there a difference between concatenate and concat? The answer is yes, but it's a very subtle difference, and it's not going to be relevant to what we need it for. So we're just going to use the concat formula. So go ahead and type in concat or select concat from your formulas here. And we're going to concatenate, concat. We're going to combine the first name first. Then because I want to have a space between first and last name, as it always the tradition, I'm going to type in a comma. And then I'm going to type in open quotes, space, close quotes, comma, B2. So C2, then the space, then B2. And that's how I combine it a full name. At least that's how I used to do it. Like I said, there's a shortcut, which is a lot more intuitive, a lot simpler, but we're not quite to that yet because I want to make sure that we used to using formulas first. But this one's actually very useful. You'll find yourself using combination formulas quite frequently. What if we want to split apart information though? All right, so what did I say? I said the class code was just a combination of initials, track number, and banner, the banner ID. So what if I want to split those information out? Assuming it's all formatted correctly and there's not different links in here, this is a very easy process. So let's go ahead and split out the initials first. Since the initials are the first 2 digits on the left, I'm going to use a formula called left, predictably. It's going to say, what is the text that I want to pull it from? And then I need to specify the number of characters. So I want to pull left A2, 2. It's going to give me my initials, MB, along with the initials of all the students, quote unquote students that I've got in the course. So then banner ID is the one that's on the far right. So you can probably predict this one. This is right. So remember, the banner ID is just the last digit, at least for these students. Then we have a bit of an issue. Because now we have the track number. We can't use the left function because the left function is already taken up by the initials. We can't use the right function as the right function is taken up by the banner ID. So we're going to have to get a little bit more clever, and we're going to have to use the mid function. And the mid function is very similar to the left and right function, but it does require a little bit more work on our part. So we're still going to go to A2. Then we need to specify where do we want to start the pull from. And you'll notice that we got the first two characters are taken up by the initials, so we're going to start at character number 3. And say number of characters 2. Not particularly difficult. What's very interesting about this is that the question always comes up, could you use this if you do not know the link, or if the link is not consistent? And the answer is yes. Generally speaking, what you would have to do is you would have to combine this with other functions to create a longer, more elaborate formula. We're not quite yet there in this course. Trust me when I say we will get to the point where we will combine functions together. And when you combine functions in Excel, that becomes a lot more powerful. Some of the things will be fairly intuitive and simple and straightforward. Some of the things like the index match function. Does anybody use index match, by the way? Has anybody ever used index match? Okay, so index match is extremely potent and extremely confusing. So that's what you have to be very careful of when you start using multiple formulas, is that tracking all the information that's being utilized can become a chore. All right, before we move on to the next one, or the last things that we're going to do, here's what I'd like for you to do. I would like for you to put your cursor on F2, and I would like for you to highlight F2 through F7, as well as G2 through G7. And we're just going to do a quick change. And the reason for this, there's actually something I want to point out, but the reason for this is our next step will not work unless we do this next task. So go ahead and copy this data. And then I just want you to paste the values, okay? Now, when you do that, you will notice that every good thing gets a nasty green flag. Now, this is an interesting one because when you see a green flag like this, it's also always accompanied by a yield sign. And what is this going to say? It's going to tell us, hey, look, the number in the cell is formatted as text or preceded by apostrophe. Sometimes this can be very useful when you actually need to have a numeric value that's in text format. It's rare that that will come up in Excel, but it will come up. In this scenario, we do not want this to be a text formula, and it will not work if we do that. So what I'd like for you to do is go up to where that yield sign is, okay? Go up to that where yield sign is. We're going to actually, oops, I got clever and I started moving around. So we're going to make sure all of our cells are highlighted, F2 through G7. We're going to go to the yield sign and see that little drop down. Click on that drop down. And this will do an automatic adjustment for Excel. We're going to convert these to numbers. So just click on convert to number. All of a sudden, those green flags go away and everything's converted to number. Everybody get that? I know it sounds like this is really easy. Some of you are just kind of like saying, yes, to move on, Dr. Barnes. My time is money. Okay, I get that. Okay. But I want to make sure, because if you do not get this step, the next one will not work. Okay, so you have to make sure we converted all these to numbers. I guess you could go in and type in the numbers manually, but that would defeat the point now, wouldn't it? All right. So now we're going to do my favorite task. We're going to do some lookups. I tell people that the time, or the day that I learned how to do a VLOOKUP, that was when the clouds parted and the heavens opened and I saw the face of God. Okay. That was like a changing, an altering moment in my history of Excel. Things have never been the same for Excel. I think lookups are very powerful. I tend to still be old school. I tend to use VLOOKUPs more frequently. I know that you learned X lookups back in 153. X lookups definitely have some advantage over V lookups and H lookups. There are also some disadvantages. We're going to talk about XLOOKUPs a little bit later in the course when we start talking about index match, but we're going to stick with the old school stuff because I do think that you're going to still encounter that frequently enough, especially with Excel boomers like me. So you want to know what's going on there. So let's go ahead and do a quick VLOOKUP. All right, so what I want to do is I want to pull based on banner ID, I want to pull the exam score from the previous page. So in H2, I want you to type in equals VLOOKUP. Oops. Let's do open parentheses instead of close parentheses. Then it specifies we need to look up the value. I'm going to look up the banner ID. And now where it says look at the table array, here's what we're going to do. We're going to click on exam 1 scores. Now, one of the things about XLOOKUP, the reason that I think it's a little bit weaker than VLOOKUPs is the fact that you have to specify an array in XLOOKUP. And what an array is that you have to specify a specific area of cells that you're going to be looking at. Why I like VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP is you don't have to specify arrays. You can specify columns, or in the case of HLOOKUPs, rows that you want to look at, rather than trying to specify a specific area of cells. So that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to do a VLOOKUP based on columns. So I want you to click on column A and drag it all the way across to E. So this is going to say we're looking for the value of banner ID. We're going to look in the first column, but our information that we can pull can come all the way from these columns over here. Now, technically speaking, you could actually just select the entire table if you really wanted to. It doesn't make a difference. We're not going to use any of the rounding information. We're only just going to go to round 2. But if you wanted to go A through I, more power to you, okay? Expand your horizons and broaden horizons to that. So, but you could, basically all we really need is A through E. So that's what I'm going to stick with. All right, hit comma after that. Column index number, we're going to put in the number 5. Now, what is this saying? This is saying, look for the information in the first column here. When you find that piece of information, move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column and return that value. Now remember, the first column is always going to be 1, so we have to count this as 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to return the rounded value of 67.57. Now hit comma. You will notice it says range lookup, and this is an optional input. I want to make sure that we note this for this course. For this course, this is really important, by the way. For this course, this is not an optional input. All right. If I give you a Excel, or if I give you a lookup function to perform, you will always put in a value here, and it will always be FALSE. Now, why do I insist upon inputting false there? If you go back, it's basically saying, as this range lookup value, you have one of 2 options. You can put in true, or you can put in false. If it put in true, it's going to do a fuzzy lookup. It's going to look for all approximate values of that. We never want to give Excel license to look for approximate values. It will fail inevitably. If we're doing it just in 6 values, that probably will be fine. If you're doing it in like 1,000 rows, it will screw up, okay? It will come up with the wrong value. So we're doing lookups, we're always going to do false. What does false say? It says return the exact match. Again, that's non-intuitive, but false is saying, well, we're going to return the exact match. This is true for all the lookups we're going to run. We're always going to put in false. Does everybody hear what I just said? For all the lookup functions we run in this course, or for the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, I should specify, because XLOOKUP, they actually got rid of that. They said, oh, we're always going to look for specific values. XLOOKUPs got fixed, but for VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, we're always going to put false for this value because we always want an exact match. There you go. And now we can flash fill this down. So that was VLOOKUP. Remember, VLOOKUP, what does the V stand for? It stands for vertical. It will actually return values in a vertical array or vertical columns, depending on how you look at it. We also have something for HLOOKUP. Now, I'm assuming that you knew this already from 153, but if V is vertical, then H has to be horizontal. So we're going to do an HLOOKUP and do a horizontal lookup. So here's what we're do. In I2, type in HLOOKUP, open your parentheses, go to track in G2. And now you can probably guess we're going to highlight rows 13 and 14. Again, we're doing a lookup on rows. Could you specify an array? The answer is yes. Arrays come up with challenges in the fact that whenever you copy the formula, it will change the limits of the array. That will still be a problem here. We'll see why in just a second. But I prefer for VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs, whenever possible, highlighting the columns and the rows respectively. All right, so we're gonna specify rows 13 and 14. So the source information is in row 1. The result that I want to return is in row 2. So for row index number, I'm going to type in 2. And then what did I say we always put in for the final value? False. Yes, we're going to have false in that final value, which I hit enter before I typed in false. How dare I? I thought it would automatically put it in. Me for a fool. All right. So we got that value. There is an issue though. When we flash fill, it's like I knew that would happen. Why did we have that problem here? We didn't have that problem flash filling in the VLOOKUP. Why do we have a problem with flash filling with the HLOOKUP? So go ahead and look at what it has in I3. I3, if you look at the rows, it's now looking at rows 14 and 15. I4, it's looking at rows 15 and 16. Remember I talked about relative cell references? That's a problem when you're running an HLOOKUP on vertically presented information because it's going to move down the rows. So relative cell references are wonderful for some regards, but I told you early on, I told you relative cell references I think it was last Friday, they're your best friend. They can also be your worst enemy. This is one of those times that after the worst enemy. We're going to fix this problem. We're going to change these to absolute references. Now, if we were operating with an array, we'd have to actually change the entire cell to an absolute reference. Since we're doing rows, we only have to change the rows themselves. So you can do this in one of two ways. You can go in and type a $ in front of 13 or 14. That's the longhand notation. Does anybody know the shorthand notation? F4. You just put it in that area, you hit F4, it will actually do that. Now, I want to make a note of this. We will use this in a couple of weeks, in a few weeks. I don't want to say a couple because that implies 2 weeks exactly. In a few weeks, if we were dealing with cells, so if I was dealing with cell A1, for example, I can toggle through different absolute value references. I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. So I'm going to type that in. So let's say that I'm looking at a specific cell. So I'm looking at cell A1. If I highlight this or put my cursor up there, I can toggle through different versions of absolute references by hitting F4. I can do fully absolute, A1 $, or $sign A, $1. I can do partial absolute, keeping the rows constant or keeping the column constant. So that's why the F4 key is actually so helpful. All right, let's go ahead and flash fill this, see if we got it to work. It looks like we got it that time. So yeah, even though they're a little bit outdated, we will talk about HLOOKUPs and VLOOKUPs, not because I'm trying to teach you outdated material, but because you may encounter that in the real world because they still get utilized by people like me so frequently. So it's important to be able to note and utilize to interpret these lookup functions. All right, let's talk about homework real quick. All right, we're going to burn through this pretty quickly. I do have something that we're going to talk about kind of in depth today, but we're going to talk about it in more detail on Monday. I did put a couple of trick questions in here, not to fool you, but because I want to set the stage for what we're going to be talking about in the next chapter. All right, which of the following statements concerning this class diagrams with multiplicities is not true? All right, so multiplicity interpretation. Anybody get sick of multiplicities on this homework? Yes. It's like, oh my gosh, Dr. Barnes, stop it, stop it. Yeah, I'm not done. We're going to have more multiplicities moving forward. So what is it saying? It's saying orders have to have one and only one customer, and a customer can have 0 orders or many orders, okay? So which of these is consistent with those? All of them except for one, okay, because it's saying not true. It says customer can place only one order. Well, we know customers cannot place any orders because they could be denied credit, or they can place many orders. So B is our answer here. Everything else is consistent with those interpretations we just talked about. Which of the following statement is true about the following class diagram? Again, if we're going to be looking at multiplicity information, because it's multiplicity interpretation, we want to know what the multiplicities say. So inventory can be involved in as many as 0 sales or many sales. Minimum of 0, maximum of many. A sale has to have at least one inventory item, but can have multiple inventory items. All right, so based on that, we got B, a sale can involve one or many inventory items. Now, a sale cannot have 0 inventory items, at least not in this context, because we're dealing with a merchandising company. So in order to have a sale, they have to sell at least one piece of merchandise. We could see different interpretations of this if we had like a company that sold both services and inventory. There could be situations where a sale could involve 0 inventory items. So keep in mind the multiplicity is not static. It's interpretive based on the situation that we're dealing with. Question number 5, which is the following example of an obligatory business rule? So remember, an obligatory business rule specifies what actions should take place. Does that mean the word should will always be present in an obligatory business rule? No, it just implies something that should take place. The reason I mention that is because our answer doesn't have the word should, it has the word must, okay? Customers must provide a valid credit card number. So in order for a transaction to take place, there should be a credit card number. So that's specifying we can't do anything if you don't provide a credit card number. So A is our answer. All right, moving on to question number 10. Which of the following best describes the meaning of this UML class diagram? Again, we're going to interpret this, okay? So inventory is going to be involved in 1 sale, or it could be, sorry, inventory item can be involved in 0 sales with a maximum of 1 sale. Interesting, okay? And then a sale has to have at least 1 inventory item, can have a maximum of many. So what would be the example of this? Inventory can be involved in 1 sale, means we're not going to resell multiple inventory items. That's kind of interesting because that's a little bit different from that interpretation. If we have, what would be the scenario? So the reason I bring this up is this is inconsistent with this up here, because we had a 0 to many multiplicity here. We got a 0 to 1 multiplicity, it's not here, right here. It's the exact same diagram otherwise. So what would be a scenario where we could have inventory only used 1 time? Well, a physical item, yeah, and a physical item that's unique in nature. Like imagine like Boeing building an aircraft. They can't sell a certain aircraft more than 1 time, so usually it's going to be unique items. Probably more appropriately be something like a skyscraper. Somebody who's building a building. Okay, you can't sell the same type of building to somebody who to somebody else. You can't say, "Oh, I really like that building. Can you replicate that in a different city?" It's going to be a different inventory item. So an inventory item legitimately can only be sold 1 time. So that's kind of an interesting interpretation and shows you how these multiplicities can change. But what's the interpretation here? Each inventory item can be sold a minimum of 0 times and a maximum of 1 time. That's what this multiplicity is saying. That's the answer is C. I was trying to stop and make you think there just for a second. What's going on there? Why we have the exact same diagram but different multiplicities here? It's because the scenario has to be different. All right. Then we had this breakdown. Some of these questions were very intuitive and straightforward. Some of them require a little bit of discussion. So let's go ahead and go through these. So I'm going to actually keep this diagram up here, and then I'm going to read from my page so we can see what the diagram says. So it says, which of the following best describes the multiplicity of number 1? Okay, so number 1 is this multiplicity here. So if we're referring to this multiplicity, where do we start? Do we start with stock exchanges or stocks? Stocks. Stocks can be sold on a minimum of 0 exchanges and a maximum of 0 or many exchanges. Okay, so that's the interpretation of that multiplicity. Which answer is most consistent with that? C? Stocks are traded in a minimum of 0 exchanges. Is that consistent with that answer? Yep. Okay. All right. Question number 12. Number 12 is looking at multiplicity number 2. So if we're looking at this one here, we start with stock exchanges and move down to stocks. So a stock exchange has to have at least 1 stock trading. Are you really a stock exchange if you have 0 stocks? It's probably said, how many stocks do you trade or exchange? 0. Well, what do? We're just here. All right. Yeah. So we have to have at least 1 stock on the stock exchange, but we can have a maximum of many. All right. So if that's the case, which answer is consistent with that? It says A says each exchange trades at least 1 stock. That's consistent with our interpretation of this particular multiplicity. All right. Question number 14 looks at number 3. So we got this multiplicity here. By now we should know this. Buy-sell transactions have to have at least 1 stock and only 1 stock. So a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 1. 1 and only 1 stock can be traded in an individual transaction. Now, that's not always true in every transaction. It's just true for this particular type of transaction we're dealing with. Okay. So you think about this for a grocery store. If you have a grocery store, you probably say, okay, I'm not going to just go into the grocery store and buy 1 item and only 1 item. You probably are a minimum of 1 item, maximum of many items. But for our interpretation here, this transaction, every single transaction has to have 1 item and only 1 item. That's basically what that's telling us, which is consistent with B. Each transaction involves only 1 stock. All right, question number 15. Question number 15 says, looking at number 4. Number 4 says 0 to many. So stocks can be sold in 0 buy-sell transaction, a minimum of 0 buy-sell transactions, so they can never be sold or never be exchanged, or they can be exchanged multiple times. So each stock is bought, sold a maximum of many times is C in our answers, and that's the correct answer. All right, 16 is where we get things a little bit confusing. Now here's the thing, is I'm going to partially explain this today. I want everybody to take diligent notes as what we're talking about today, because we're going to come back to this on Monday. All right, because my guess is most of you did not get the correct answer on 16, and that's fine, because the good news is this is all graded on completion, not based on accuracy. That's why I grade on completion, so I can throw trick questions at you. This is not really a trick question, it's just a question that's incomplete based on what we know so far. So 16 says, which of the following is best way to implement buy-sell transactions, stock classes, and association between the preceding UML diagram and a database? We're going to talk about relational databases on Monday. We've already alluded to them a little bit, talking about primary key and foreign key. And it says, A, the primary key of stocks is a foreign key in buy-sell transactions. Okay. Did everybody think that that was an accurate statement? Hopefully you did, because that is a correct answer. A is a correct answer, okay? But B says the primary key of buy-sell transactions is a foreign key in stocks. Did everybody think that was a correct answer? I'm going to assume most of you did, and unfortunately, that is not a correct answer. The reason why has to do with the nature of multiplicities here, okay? For stocks to mean in buy-sell transactions, we know that many stocks could be in an individual, it could be in many transactions. So tracking stocks as a primary key would be difficult because there's a multiplicity of many here. Whereas buy-sell transactions have one and only one, meaning that a maximum multiplicity of one is present here. It can only be present in one time. What this is telling us is that in order for a primary key to be used as a foreign key, the multiplicity on the two items that are being examined has to be a maximum of one, has to be a one, okay? Now, a maximum of one. We will never have a maximum of 0. There's no reason to put a multiplicity there. So a maximum of 1 has to be present. Now, as we're going to see, we're going to look at an example of this on Wednesday, a much more detailed example. This can either be 1 to 1, or this can be 0 to 1. The deviation or the differentiation is not that big, but it's important to note that for foreign keys to exist, there has to be a maximum multiplicity of 1. And that's not necessarily intuitive. We'll see why when we get down to the drill down here. Trust me when I say I've already got this. Oops, I don't have it set up. I've got this set up in a spreadsheet. I'm ready to talk about it on Wednesday, but it's a little bit dense and it'll be make a lot more sense. Yeah, so chapter 5 homework session. We'll talk about this on Wednesday. All right. Question number 17. 17 is talking about the number 5 here. So here we're looking at brokers can be involved in 0 buy-sell transactions, which means you're a very bad broker because you're not doing any work at all, or involved in many buy-sell transactions. Okay, so which answer is consistent with that? Well, we've got a couple of possibilities. We've got each broker is involved in a maximum of many buy-sell transactions and involved in a minimum of, involved in a minimum of 0 buy-sell transactions. So both B and D are correct, so E is our correct answer. All right, our last multiplicity question is going to be this one here. Buy-sell transactions involve one and only one broker. That's all there is to it. So if we look at the answers, A says buy-sell transactions involves one broker. That's how we interpret that one. All right, on 19, does 19 look familiar? 19 is basically the same question as 16, except it's looking at this relationship right here. Is anybody a little bit cautious now moving into 19, saying, okay, I'm not sure that my answer is correct anymore? All right, so let's go through 19 again. The primary key of brokers is a foreign key in buy-sell transactions. What do you else think about that? Is that a correct answer? It is a correct answer. What about the primary key of buy-sell transactions is a foreign key in brokers? It is not a correct answer, okay? For the exact same reason that we talked about here, you will notice that the same relationship exists in this direction as it exists in this direction. Because we have a multiplicity of 1, we can have brokers be a primary key in buy-sell transactions, but buy-sell transactions cannot be a primary key in brokers. Again, that's not intuitive, but we'll see why that makes sense when we talk about this on Monday. Again, I just want you to make a note of this as we're talking about it today, because I'm going to have you refer back to it on Monday, and I want you to make a little bit of detail, say, all right, we talked about this, and now I understand why. At least I hope you understand on Monday. If we don't understand on Monday, then I completely failed you as an instructor. All right. Going on to our problems. I don't ever want to completely fail as an instructor. So identify the classes and association of the following narrative and draw a class diagram of multiplicities. All right, so classes. Well, we talked about 4 types of classes that are present in UML diagrams. Does anybody remember what they are? 3 of them should be easy. There are entities. What are those 3? Resources, events, and agents. Very good. Very good. Okay. There's also a fourth one. There's also a class, but it's not an entity. What was that called? Conceptual structures. Conceptual structures. Okay. And so we're not going to talk about conceptual structures in this problem, but keep in mind, all entities are classes. Not all classes are entities. We do have that fourth conceptual structure. It's not an entity. So I think a good approach for this particular problem is identifying what are our entities, or more accurately, what are our resources, events, and agents. So let me read through this. Dr. Franklin. Can we say Dr. Franklin is one of our entities? Yes. What type of entity is Dr. Franklin? An agent, okay? Dr. Franklin runs a small medical clinic specializing in family practice. She has many patients. Are patients an entity? Yes, they are. What type of entity are they? Agents. They're also agents. When the patients visit the clinic, okay, do we have an entity present in that sentence or that part of a sentence? There's a visit, okay? There's a visit. That would be an entity. What type of entity or what type of entity would that be? An event, okay? An event is triggered by the visit of the patient to the clinic, okay? All right. So more specifically, we could say perform several tests to diagnose the condition. So we could say the test or the actual event, whichever one you prefer. They both represent the same item. There's an event that happens between the agent and the two agents, the patient and the doctor. So yeah, we're pretty good there. We can also say that bills the patient one amount for the visit plus additional amounts for each test. Okay, but the billing could also be an alternate event, but we're going to ignore that for the time being. I kind of stampeded over this to say the visit and the test could actually be, but can we consider test to be something else other than an event? We could say that that's an entity that's also a resource, because why does somebody visit the doctor's office? They could say, because I want to have some work done. I want to visit the doctor to actually reach a conclusion. So the way that I interpret this is slightly different from the information in the book, but the way that I interpret this is this particular right here. So again, we have our agents, we have our patients, patient visits, test services. Now the multiplicities are up somewhat to our interpretation, but these are fairly intuitively sensible, okay? So patient visits involve one and only one Dr. Franklin, okay? Patient visits involve one and only one patient. A patient can visit 0 times, so you could have somebody who says they're coming in and never show up, or you got patient visit multiple times, okay? Especially if they're one of those people that there's like me, it's the first time they get a cough, it's like, I'm going to the doctor. It used to not be like that back when I was young and I thought I was invulnerable. Then I found out I was not invulnerable and it changed things. All right, Dr. Franklin probably involved in 0 patient visits, has no visits for the day, or multiple patient visits in a day. Tests can involve 0 patient visits or multiple patient visits. Okay, so we can have a single test that doesn't involve a visit, or a test that involves multiple visits. This one's probably a subjective one, because if you're going to have a test, you probably have to have at least 1 patient visit. But I assume that there's possibility that you could have a test that doesn't involve a patient visit, especially if you got information from another source. Patient visits can involve 0 tests, like you have no services performed. Second with the doctor, I'm sick, and says, no, you're not sick, you just don't feel good. Or you could have multiple tests associated with it. Has anybody ever gone to the doctor's office and never had any tests performed? That happens to me occasionally, especially because I go to the doctor's office so much. Yeah. I don't really go to the doctor's office. I did it over the summer because I had a cough that wouldn't go away. I felt like I was visiting the doctor every other week, and I said, she's going to kick me out here. She's not going to want to visit me anymore. I felt that I was becoming one of those people who visits way too much. All right, last question for the day. Identify the classification in the following narrative and draw a class diagram with multiplicities. All right. So again, same process. Let's identify our classes. All right. What's our first class in this narrative? I'm not gonna read through it this time, but you guys can read through it and basically stop when you identify a class and tell me what type of class it is. So Page, did everybody say Page is our first class? What type of class is Page? Agent. Good. Okay. All right. By the way, there's probably another class that's implicit here, but it's not stated in the paragraph. Okay. Can we say customers would probably also be a class? Because probably having a yogurt shop without customers probably defeats the purpose. So I just like making yogurt. I don't really care about selling it, but I just like making that would really defeat the purpose. Or maybe Paige eats all the yogurt herself. Who knows? But yeah, we're gonna assume customers are also there and they're also agents. All right. In this particular one, this is a purchasing transaction. So what would be the example of another class that's listed here? So buying yogurt, buying plastic cups, buying cones. What do those all have in common? Buying items. Okay, so there's going to be two classes implicit. There's the event, which would be a purchase. And then I believe you said inventory, okay, is also going to be an item. Now there's something interesting to note here. All right. It says page counts yogurts and cones as inventory, treats the cup as an operating expense, and doesn't track any cup inventory. Now I want you to hold on to that because that's going to actually affect our multiplicities. Here's the interpretation of this diagram. Wow, that looks really familiar. Remember I said that this is basically all you need to know at this point, and I showed you a diagram in the slides like this, and I said you could use this diagram interchangeably. I wasn't lying, okay? I could basically use it for all the examples. We got page and our suppliers, we got the purchases and the inventory. Now this is an interesting one, okay? We have purchases that can involve 0 inventory items. Does that seem counterintuitive to anybody in the room? Say, if we're going to have a purchase, shouldn't we always have an inventory item for purchase? I mean, that's kind of the event that in. What is going to be, what predicates the fact that we have a 0 multiplicity on the inventory for purchase? Yeah, the cups are treated as an operating expense, not as an inventory item. So you could have a purchase that's not counted as an inventory item. Is that a subtle distinction? Yes, but it's an important distinction to make. That's why we have a multiplicity of 0 here instead of 1. So an interesting distinction to make. Now, what if page treated all items as inventory? Would it be more appropriate to say this is a 1 to many multiplicity? Probably so. You could make an argument that there's still purchases that page can make that would not be of inventory, like if she got a service, like somebody came in and cleaned the yogurt machines or something like that. Either way, how you actually make the distinction is really, really important based on the details in the graph. So this is not the last time we'll see UML diagrams and last time we'll see multiplicities, but hopefully this was a good introduction to this. All right, have a good weekend. See you all on Monday.
You too.